Okay. Scalable system interviews are the same length of a normal interview, so that would be 45 minutes. In real life, you have a bit less than 45 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So I have logged into my iPad as well because I want. That's where I share my screen and draw something. It's not whiteboard, so is that okay?
Perfect. Use the setup you would want to use during an interview. I do also give feedback on the full setup.
Okay.
Just for me to know, what is your background?
So I'm a software engineer with 10 plus years of experience developing web applications using Java and Spring framework. Currently, I'm working as a tech lead. I design and develop web applications that are used by cash desk traders for hedging and cooling purposes, basically for creating mortgage-backed securities. Prior to Freddie Mac, I worked at Thomson Reuters, and before Thomson Reuters, I worked at Wipro Technologies. So I have experience working across multiple domains like manufacturing, healthcare, and finance. I did bachelor's in computer science and engineering. Currently, I'm based out of Virginia.
Okay. And so always back-end, sometimes front-end?
Most of the times it is back-end. Sometime back, I used to work in front-end, but nowadays it's all completely on back-end.
Okay. Good. When did you take the class with IT?
In end of September.
Okay. Okay, good. Do you have any questions to me before we get started?
No, this is my first system design interview, so I'm not sure. Okay, this is my first one.
All right, take a deep breath then. And then if you have any questions, I usually like to do it like I would in a real interview. Sorry, my background is I used to interview at Google. And I like to do it like I would do a Google interview, and so I tend to leave the feedback at the end, but I always say if you have something that you want to discuss during the interview, feel free to ask.
Sure.
Okay. I can make a note on it to come back to you at the end. Okay. Feel free to share what you want to be taking notes on. That's when I'm going to start the clock, and then we're going to get started on the interview.
I'm going to share the content now.
Sounds good. All right, so we want to build a forum. Okay, a forum is an application where a user can post questions and then have discussion based on specific topics. Okay, and I'm going to explain a little bit more what the requirements are. This forum should support sub-forums, forums that are basically based on a user interest. Okay, so let's say you like astronomy or cooking or hiking or anything, then you're going to have a forum for talking about hiking. The second one is our forum should support infinite threading. That means that the discussion between users can go as deep, basically infinitely deep. And the last one is we want to allow every single logged in user to be able to basically add a plus or a minus to every post, like an upvote or a downvote. Okay. And we may talk about how we want to use that, but we need to support that at the individual post level, post or comment.
Okay. So at a high level, I see that you are looking for a different categories to post a question about, and under a category, a user can post any comment or any. So let's say a user has a question, a login user can come and post a question on it, and to that, and any number of users can reply to that question or upvote or downvote the comments. This is what the basic requirements I get. Is it correct?
Correct. It doesn't have to be a question though.
Okay, sure.
Right.
And only login users can upvote or downvote or add comments. I think if the user is not a login user, just as a guest, the user would not be able to add anything. They will just have a read view. I think that's what we want to restrict it to only the login users, right? And
Correct.
is there any limit on the text of the question? Do we have want to limit the text of the question, or it can be, or for the comments also? Do we want to limit it to certain characters, or it can be anything? Shall we restrict it to first some 255 characters or so? Is that okay?
Okay. So from a product perspective, think of me as your product manager. If you need any product question, we do not have a limit on the amount of characters. So feel free to put a limit that's reasonable from an engineering perspective.
Okay. So I would say a question, let's say 1,000 characters. For now, let's limit it to 1,000 characters.
Okay.
MFRs, I'm just typing. Each post or comment. Limit to 1,000 characters. And the different views could be, let's say if user wants to see all the posts related to astronomy, then there should be some option to select a category and see all the posts related to that category. I assume that's how we want it to be. And then when user logs into first time this forum, how do we want to display? We just want to display the top 10 questions based on the ratings, or just based on the recently created postings. I mean, in the past few days, based on the last updated timestamp, based on that, if we display top 30 or until that page view, that should be okay. So the initial dashboard view is going to be based on dashboard. Dashboard based on recent posts.
Recent post seems reasonable.
Reasonable, okay. And then user should be able to select a category and then see all the posts under that category. Let's say if they are interested in a particular category. What else? Feedback of the post, and there is feedback only two options. One is either upvote or downvote, right?
Yes.
And that thread can go any deeper. So I guess this is what the I think I have the requirements that I need to start the system. Now, coming to capacity estimate, I just want to have a feel of how this the user base for this system is going to be. So this would help me at the end if we want to scale the system or consider what is the throughput and latency. So I just want to have a rough idea of the estimation of this. Okay. So let me just take a guess, relate to any other forum like Stack Overflow or any other forum where user can come post a question and then comment. So can I assume that daily active users are somewhere around 1 million active users, or that is too much? It's on a higher range.
Let's go up a little bit. Let's go to 50 million.
To 50 million?
Mm-hmm.
50 million active users, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So daily active users is going to be 50 million. Then, so per second it's going to be, and 50 million users are active, but not all 50 million users are going to post a question. This is read to write ratio. This is a read heavy system. Usually these type of forums, people come for answers. So I assume that read is going to be heavier than write. And out of 50 million users, let's say 1 million users are posting it to us, or is it too high? 1 million, can I assume that 1:50 as the read to write ratio, or something like 1:100?
Yeah, feel free to make up numbers here.
Okay, 1:50. Okay. Then read is going to be 50 million and write is going to be 1 million. So number of then what? So how many number? So 1 million users means, so 1 million posts are going to be there per day, and then that boils down to, and assuming that each post is going to have an average of 10 comments per post, 10 replies or 10 feedbacks per post. So we have to store 10 million posts per day, and assuming that each will have 1,000 characters, because we are going to limit it to 1,000 characters. Let's say that is 1 KB. So 10 million into 1 KB. That is 10 GB of data that we have to store.
So the 1 kilobyte comes from the 1,000 character limit?
Yeah, 1,000 character limit.
Okay.
So I'm assuming it's 10 to the power of 10. So 10 GB is what we have to store only for character. Megabytes, and 10 to the power of 6 megabyte, 10 to the power of 9 megabytes is 1 GB. So here we have 10 to the power of 10. So 10 GB is what the total storage. Need to store only this one, but along with this, it's not just this characters. We have to store some metadata like who logged in, what is the user ID, and other details. So I'm assuming it's approximately 12 GB of data we have to store per day. And then that boils down to, so let's estimate for 5 years, that is 12 into 365 into 5, 60. Okay, 3.6 terabytes. I think that should be I think modern day servers can hold 3.6 terabytes. So from a storage perspective, I see it is not a huge storage what we are expecting in terms of storage. Now, let me go into this. I will come back to this when we need to scale up based on the numbers. So let me first design how we will serve for how a single request is going to be served. Based on that, we'll come to the scale at the end. Now, I'll go with the API design. The APIs that we need is first. Okay, there are multiple I see. There are based on the requirement. One is to list all the posts based on timestamp, and the second one is post question. This is insert a post, that is generate a post. Third one is comment on that post, and then upload or download, then feedback. Then update to that post, comment on post a feedback. Now let me design these three. These are the four APIs I'm thinking of based on a search post based list post and list post based on some category. So these are the four things I'm thinking of. Let me go to this. Now let's go to post. That means create a post that sorry, I'm having issues with my pen, that stylus, that iPad pen. I don't know, first time this is giving me issues.
Is there's, well, oh, okay.
Oh, that pointer has come out. This is a brand new pen. I used it for 3 days and today that pointer has come out. So I'm sorry.
Okay. Is there something else you can use so we can finish the interview?
Okay, but I just put it back. But if if there is an issue, what I'll do is I'll switch on my camera and I'll do the whiteboarding here. So maybe if that helps.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah. This is create a post. Create post. For this, the required is user ID, because user has to be a logged in user to create a post. So first is a user ID. Then the actual post itself, or category, under what category this post is going to be, because we do have different sections in this forum. And then the actual post itself, the text, actual text, and then created time. And do we want to see what are the latest trends in the posts or other things? Do we want to have those? I think in the requirement we did not say anything about what are the high. Are there any trending posts? Do we want to search based on any hashtag or anything?
Oh, I mean, any kind of annotation on the post itself?
Yeah, any keywords that you want to associate with this to do, or if not, then I will just go ahead with this one for the time being.
So let's say we wanted to actually tag it with certain keywords. What would the API look like?
No, I just want to have, or I just want to save the tags. Let's say when a post is created with 2 or 3 hashtags, those list of hashtags also I want to associate with the post itself. So that's easy to retrieve when we want to retrieve.
And so the hashtags would be provided. How would they be? Who would provide those hashtags?
User, whoever is posting that message, the first time that post is created, at that time the user will have those hashtags and then.
And they're different from the text itself.
Different from the text itself. That's what I'm thinking. Oh, are you saying that why don't you extract from the text itself? If something is there, then extract from the text itself.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious, are they different? Like, do you envision that as a different field altogether, or?
No, okay, it's a part of the text. That's what they are saying. Okay.
That is a fair question. I think that's a product question at that point. I just wanted to clarify where you saw those hashtags go.
It would be part of the text. Part of the text.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I will have a list of hashtags. If the hashtags are also provided, then as a separate one.
Okay, let's forget about the hashtags and focus on actually like implementing the 3 other functions we have to implement.
So once this content is given, the response is going to be a success message which says that tag is create. A response would be shown to the user, and post would be a display. That's what the response is going to be. Now the next one is update the post. That means update in the sense that user wants to comment on that post, that there is another user who wants to comment on that post. So for this also, the main thing is user ID is the mandatory, and after So after user ID, then it's going to be the again the post ID on which the user wants to do.
Okay.
Yeah, post ID, and then because the post which the user is going to update, we need to know. That's the reason I'm just saying post ID, and then the actual text itself. So these are the inputs that are required to the service. Then the next one is display part. List of posts. This is this one category is an optional. Let's say category is an optional thing. If category is not passed as a parameter, then all the posts within the post with the based on the last times the recent post will be displayed, and number of posts that we want to see, that number of posts, and also page number. Let's say we are doing a pagination, we have too many posts and we want to go to the next page, it would be based on page number.
Okay.
Okay, that's all with this. I think I'm covering.
What would this post return exactly?
Oh, this post will return within that. Let's say category is not given, then all the 20 posts in recent 20 posts will be returned with the comments to that post.
So the full.
It's not the full, because if user has for each post, let's say there are going to be, we said unlimited number of threads, right? Each post can have. So instead of returning unlimited number of threads, we will limit it to 10 feedback. And if users, as and when user scrolls down to those 10, then we will further retrieve from the database instead of retrieving all the unlimited number of posts. So. Would that work, or do you see any issues there?
Okay, let's keep going. I would like to see database.
Okay, sure. I have a user table, and then this user table is going to be have user ID and username. User ID is going to be an int character. It has a character field. This character, let's assume, let's say give it as 100 characters, and then what else? Other information like email address. Email address. User ID, name, email address, and then when this user is created time, just to create it, just to see things how long, how old is, how this user is with the system, current system, and these are the basic fields of the user that I can think of. And then the post table. This is the one which is going to have the actual post. Whenever a new post is created, this is we can have a master list of categories. We can have a master table. The table which will have the initial, what are the list of categories that are available, like category ID and category, the name of that category. So this is int, and this is character field. And for audit purposes, we can have what time this category was created. All the audit fields we can have. That's a created timestamp. Created that and updated it. Let's say if there is any updated timestamps, date and time, and date and time here. Now comes to post. Each post will have a ID and post ID. This is an integer, and the actual post will also have the user ID, because post is associated with each user ID, and then category ID as well. And another is, and one more thing, then the actual text. The actual text of it. This is also a character string, and this is int. This is int, and these two are foreign keys to category table and user table. And in post, ID is the primary key. Then another thing we want to have here is each post will have a feedback. I mean comments on to that post. So how do we associate that post is one way is have a post and comment table, and then say post ID, and then we'll have in the same table, but it will also have a parent post ID. If parent post ID is null, means this is the topmost post which is created, and whenever there is an update to that post, we'll just create an entry by referring to this one. So this way we can maintain a sequence of who replied to what post. So I'll have a parent post ID. For the first post, it would be always be null, but later on, this will have a reference to the previous post. And then another two things we want to maintain is upvote or downvote, right? So we can have one boolean. Flag which says up if it is upvoted or downvoted. By default, it will by upvote or downvote, we can, by default it would be null. If it is upvoted, we can have it as 1, and downvoted we can have it as 0 each. How many number of upvotes and downvotes also we may have to do. So I think one counter of upvote counter and downvote counter, something like that. Yeah. Let's say if one post was upvoted by 5 users, then and here, do we want to also keep track of who upvoted, or just upvote itself is good enough? If we want to keep track of who upvoted, then that's a different one. I have to maintain it as separately. So,
let's take a step back and think here. Do we really want to keep track of the user itself? Is there some upside and downside of keeping track of who the user who upvoted or downvoted was?
I think it's just keeping track of upvotes and downvotes would be good enough.
The total count?
Okay, so then total count of upvote count is going to be integer, and downvote.
I guess we have two options here, right? We could either keep this upvote and downvote count here, or we can have probably a separate table. We just keep track of who upvoted and downvoted. Can you walk me through the trade-offs we're making here?
Sure. Okay. So having a different table where we have by post ID, I mean just say post ID, and then 2 columns which says upvote and downvote, and then incrementing the counters. So if it is a write-heavy system, then just having it on the separate table would make sense, and then that way we are not frequently updating the actual post itself where users are reading when it is upvoted or downvoted. Otherwise, if we have it in the same table, I see what you're saying. If we have it in the same table, then updating whenever this is updated, we may have to log that record and the read, because this is a read heavy system we are saying, right? So we don't want to log this record. So I think having the separate table would be a faster enough instead of updating. The reason is, having in the same table, we have to do an repeatedly updates on the same post. But in a separate table, the actual post itself, we are not changing anything. Only the based on post ID, we are updating the counter. That's all it is. So we are not blocking the entire post itself.
How is that a problem? I don't understand the reasoning here of why this would be a problem.
Why this is a problem? Because if we are reading the same, if this is a read heavy system, right? So we are reading the same record, and we are also at the time we are trying to update the same record. So that's the reason I think it's better not to touch the actual one and have it as a separate thing.
Okay. So we're moving this to separate tables. We don't update the main post. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Now my question will be: well, we still need to get this information when we serve the post. How are we going to do that?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
We do need to want to show this information to the user, the number of the number of votes on a specific post, right? To know what the total tally is. How are we going to do that if it's a separate table?
Oh, okay. So two things. Either we can, when we retrieve the post itself, we can join the other table and get the upvote and downvote details along with this, or have it as a two different queries. First, retrieve the post, and then the post that we are interested in, get from the other table, and then join it together. Aggregate it and then show it to the user. Okay, so this, if we have too many requests, how are we going to handle this? Do you want me to discuss at this point itself, or shall we do at the end when we have too many requests?
Let's talk about it now.
Okay,
the scale is here now.
Okay, sure. Let's say there are once the post is created, and there are too many upvotes and downvotes to that. How do we show that the user is, with the minimum latency and high throughput? That's what the question here is. One thing is, we can introduce a caching layer. Instead of every time we want to retrieve the let me take a step back and go to the first use case of the use case of listing down all the top all the recent posts, okay, regardless of category. So what we can do is, we can retrieve all the recent posts and then have them cached, and any user, whenever a user comes in, instead of going to database, we can show it from the cache. Then how frequently are we going to update the cache? So whenever a new post or a new feedback or new update is added, we can do a write through cache, like first update the cache and then do it to the database. That way it would be faster. Now, whenever any upvote or downvote happen, how do we want to update it? One way is first updating the database and then update the cache. One thing here I see is, even there is a latency of few seconds in showing the upvote and downvote. Is that okay? Instead of showing the post itself, delayed in the post itself.
is the question whether we can return the post without the actual vote? Or are you asking something else?
No, what I'm trying to say is, let's say when a user has upvoted, then the other users, whoever are seeing that post at the same time, there will be a little latency in seeing that upvote to that users. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that acceptable? Otherwise, need to think about the moment that is updated. We have to update all the posts that users have.
Okay. We are okay with eventual consistency.
Okay. So, then, any more questions here before I move on to the high-level design of how this is going to be?
Yes, we have not talked about the actual database we're using here. What type of database are we looking at?
Okay, so the database we are looking at here, it could NoSQL database would work here.
Okay, so what's the sharding key in all those tables?
Okay, so sharding is going definitely not based on user ID, because what we are looking at is a post. So sharding would be based on a post ID.
Okay.
Post ID. So we'll retrieve all the posts for a given category. If we want to see all the posts, how do we get this done? Okay. Just give me a minute. I'm just thinking about the sharding technique for this. What if I do sharding this? Okay, the requirement here is to retrieve for all the based on the last timestamp or based on a category. So if I do sharding based on post ID, how am I going to get the time? I mean, last 10, that would not work, because I need to get based on either category or time. I think time series. I'm thinking about sharding based on this particular time, based on the time as well.
Okay, so based on time, and then so what would be our exact key in this case? Exact sharding key, sorry.
On the recent category ID. Let's say if I do it based on okay, sorry, if I do it based on the time, then 1 day worth of data, it's always going to be on the same server. I mean, it's not going to be sharded to multiple servers, and at any given point of time, it's always going to be one server is going to be heavily loaded. That's all. If it is based on this means then category could be one option. Based on category, we can shard it. But the problem is, if one category is, one category has huge number of posts, that server would be too much. I would go with the post ID itself. Post ID, the sharding is going to be based on post ID. Post, and if we want to retrieve the latest post, then we'll retrieve from all different servers what are the posts within the past, within the time frame that we want to retrieve, then aggregate them and then show it to the list. So I will go with post ID as the sharding key.
So when we explored the time-based or the category-based sharding key, you mentioned some downside with those. Is there a downside with pulling or using the post ID as the sharding key?
The downside is we have to go to all the servers to get a post, and also for one particular post, if we want to see the feedbacks for all the posts, then every time we have to query all the servers, because we don't know where the let's say this post has 10 different comments. And all these comments may be spread across. If user is going through one post, then all these posts are spread across, could be in one server or through spread across 10 servers, because it is based on post ID. So that's one disadvantage of with the post ID.
Okay. So we have the choice. We are choosing the operation, we're making it slow by choosing our sharding key in this case. What do you think makes sense to potentially make slow?
Out of all three shardings, which one is potentially slow? That you are asking. Post shard is potentially slow because if the sharding is based on post ID, that's what that slows down the retrieval operation. Another thing is if there is a parent ID, if I do it based on parent ID, only based on parent ID that post, so all the posts related to that, all the posts underneath that particular thing will be on only on one server. It is not spread across. So in this case, at least if I want to drill down the eventual post of that, I can always go to the same server, but my initial loading of recent post would be slowed down.
The parent ID is going to change throughout the comment tree.
Sorry, yes, that's correct. Sorry, I was thinking that it's a top one, but each one will have its own parent ID. I'm sorry.
Okay, but maybe there's something else here.
User ID. User ID also. User ID, because one post can have multiple users. Then the one I see out of these three is the category ID.
Okay, let's move on to something else. I would like us to spend more time on other parts. I would like us to talk about caching, because we've talked about scale here. I would like us to discuss the caching aspect of this problem.
Okay, so the first use case where I see is like most of the users, the moment they log in, they see a dashboard or the home page where we display a top records, top care records with the recent posts, right? So that's that data we can cache. That is that data would be cached. And how do we update the caches? Whenever there is a new post or some updates, that's when we write to the database and then also update the cache. But this cache, the top care records is always cached, and whenever user logs in, we'll give it from the cache instead of going to database.
Okay, so hold on here. So whenever we talk about caching, what's the key and what's the actual value we're storing?
Okay. So the list is going to be based on category ID. Actual value is the post itself and the list of posts, and then key here is
the full post, including all replies. Like, is it a post that's trimmed? Like, what exactly are we storing?
We are storing post and the associated. Let's say each post has 10 comments. There are so many comments, but we are going to store only the top 10 comments for each post. Or top 10 or 20, how many we can display on a page, though only those will be stored in our cache.
Okay, what's our eviction policy?
Okay, this is eviction policy is least recently used. That is LRU mechanism that I will use to evict the cache if there are new entries that come in.
Okay, and so the recent post is going to store post based on time. How do we ensure that then it's like you said recent post, so it has to have a time element to it, which I'm not really seeing in this design.
Okay, you are saying how that recent posts are going to be in cache and how are we going to evict that? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a ring buffer with a certain number of elements. Let's say we want to store only some 100 recent posts. So my ring buffer size is going to be have only 100. Initially, I will load 100 recent ones, and as soon as the 101 comes, that would be replaced by the first one. So I don't need to do any special calculation over here. When the new one comes in, the old one would get replaced, and only the top 100 or whatever the number that we want to display, that would be stored. And this is, I will use a ring buffer for data structure.
But as far as I can tell, this is an LRU cache. So if we have a very popular post that's old, it would still be in this cache. Right? There is no guarantee that the ring buffer would actually rotate. Like potentially a very popular post would stay there longer than newer ones.
Okay. Okay. So in that case, LRU, that means we want to keep the last recently used in our, then I will use a hash map, linked hash map, where every time a post is retrieved, we'll update the linked list. And let's say in my linked list, I'll keep a head and tail, and the latest will always be moved to the latest will always be moved to the tail, and then if I want to make space, I will remove it from the head. That's how by using a linked hash map, I can use the LRU policy. And my
Okay.
key is going to be post ID.
Okay, so we're caching the most recent post. Which query, or which, if we get back to our API here, which API does it have?
That is, list posts by default it will list all the recent ones from the cache. If there are if a page number is passed, then we'll move to the next page. That's all.
Yep. Okay, so this post is going to show a single post here. Okay, we're going to invalidate it. Okay, let's say we launched here and we decided we're going to support a new feature. This feature allows a very famous user to answer questions from our users or comments from our users for a short amount of time, usually a couple of hours. How does that impact our design? And we're not going to have the time to actually do the whole problem here, but I would like us to explore how that impacts our current design.
Okay, so if a user is going to answer to multiple users, when you say answer, that means is it the other users are so there is an open post to which multiple users are going to comment, and this user is going to reply to those comments. That's what you said.
Yes, so it's going to be a post. Usually the person posting that is going to be famous. Think of your favorite artist. So millions of people are interested in them. And they're going to go and say, hey, I'm this person. And the users will start posting on that, and they're going to be answering the question that the user posted on this.
Okay. So in that case, what is that? How are we going to extend our current design to that requirement? That's what the question is, right? So in that case, my update post is going to be called so many number of times with the because that's a one single post and it will have and you said millions of users are commenting at the same time. I mean, so so how I need to see how that update is going to work in that case. Okay. Mm. Let's say one user has posted and this user is repeating, and there are too many writes are going to be at the same time, and then so what we can do is whenever there is an update comes in, we can do a cache through and then write through cache, where first we'll update our cache and return it to instead of updating the database. That way it would be faster, no? And then we'll update it to the persistent store in async way. Is there any downside in this?
Okay, we're gonna have to leave that as an exercise. So that's about 45 minutes. I don't want to go too much over.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So this was a full exercise that we covered. We went through a lot of different areas. I'd like you to reflect a little bit and think about what are the areas where you felt you did well, what are the areas you think you would maybe need a little bit more practice here.
Okay. So basically, how we are going to scale based on sharding. I should have think about what are the different pros and cons and present it, and then before I finalize on something, I need to think of all different possibilities and all different pros and cons, and it's not just one use case. I need to go through all three use cases and see how that's going to serve, and would that really work or not. So that I have to think of before even suggesting something. That's what I do. And also when I propose caching as a solution, so I need to give a complete picture of what is my key and what some value is going to be, and when that cache updates are going to happen, and how that cache is going to be updated. So that's where I see I need more practice, and database design. I think I'm pretty close there. I mean, I was able to. I see. And capacity estimate, maybe I could be a little bit speed up the things there. I don't need to spend that much time on capacity estimate itself.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what I feel.
All valid point. I'm going to piggyback on some of them. I guess I'm going to start with the last one because that's the first one. Actually, no. I'm going to go through my notes just to make sure I don't forget something. All right, so we started with the background. We spent a bit of time kind of clarifying what the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. Let's go actually to this page. The first page we discussed together with the non-functional requirements. All right, perfect. So we have the requirements, and the non-functional requirements we call the search post. Okay, so we did actually ask one question about this, and then we asked the limit on that. Okay, for me, you didn't ask that many questions on the product side. Okay, you asked two good questions. Now that I realize those were actually good functional requirements, but you didn't ask anything about, let's say, like posting itself. Like, do we allow images? Do we allow videos? Right? Because that changes our storage capacity quite a bit. When it came to actually like users, how are users distributed? Right? Do we care about the latency? Because if I said that we wanted to distribute our app over the entire world and we want a reasonable latency, then we have to be multi-data center. Okay, so I would encourage you to ask more questions on this, especially on the non-functional requirement. I think you understood the problem overall, but I think that's going to help you design a little bit, help with the design. Okay, and my tip is you can think of apps that are very similar to what we're doing here and think about the feature they support. Okay, what can you give me a couple of examples of well-known websites that actually have a similar feature set?
Post message, social networking platforms of now.
It depends which one.
Like Facebook, someone post a comment and then reply to that, like the post or dislike.
Yeah, Facebook is a good example, right? Facebook allows you to post that. I would argue that in some cases, Facebook might be closer to real-time messaging, using the messenger itself, but the main role is definitely this. That's a good example. Another one you could have thought about is Quora, right? Question answer. Which also has a vote and downvote. Okay, another one. Sorry, pardon me, go ahead.
Sorry, that didn't come to my mind from the Quora.
And that's fine. You don't have to remember all of them. This basically is based on Reddit, which you may or may not be a user of it. But if you had told me Stack Overflow or Quora, I'm like, yeah, this is the same kind of website. And then you can start using this. You can pierce together what makes sense to support. Okay. Stack Overflow allows you to just basically naturally sort by the ranking. That's kind of what they do. They don't do by time, they use by ranking. They also allow the other user to moderate. Right? Moderation is not something we talked about. Or what about editing a post? Okay. That's why I'm asking, like, the more you can get out of the way up front, the easier it's going to get for you to design. All right, outside of that, I think you had a good grasp of the problem on that point. Okay. I felt like you could have gone a little bit faster on this. You mostly repeated what I said for the first 5 minutes. Not uncommon, but you need to switch really to looking at the actual requirements. Okay, so I'm done with this. Let's switch to the capacity.
Capacity.
Right? Capacity is our next problem. Okay. You clearly said read-heavy system. Really good. That's very true. Read-heavy system, we decided 50 to 1. Very fine, 100 to 1, 50 to 1. The slow, hard, and fast rule. Those are reasonable numbers. Okay. One thing, you said 1,000 character is 1 kilobyte. Okay. That is wrong. 1,000 characters is 1 kilobyte in English, assuming a UTF-8 or an ASCII compatible encoding. Okay. We never talked. Do we want to support international users? Because if we do, and we probably should, this is the 21st century after all, what is a more reasonable amount of byte?
So 100 KB?
One character, you said 1 character is 1 byte. Okay. Which is true under certain assumptions, which I just outlined, and those don't hold for most applications.
Okay.
The answer here is it depends on your encoding, and you should know that. Like, this is one of the things you should know when you do database design. And if you don't remember anything I say, just remember that 2 character is a better estimate. The reason is, depending on the language that you're manipulating, the size is going to vary. Okay? But if you say 1 character is 1 byte, that tells me you're stuck in ASCII word. Okay? That's just what I wanted to say. I think in general, you should simplify your computations. Like you did 24. I wasn't sure what took you so long to do the 365 times 5 is 2400. If you to just say like, I was fine, just say, you know, it's 10, 360 or 350 and then 5. And then simplify. At the end of the day, the number doesn't matter.
Okay.
Personally, I didn't care about the number, except is the order of magnitude correct? Are you capable of outlining how you get to this result? That's really what I'm looking for.
Okay.
And at the end, you say came up with 3.6 terabyte. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. That's a decent number. It doesn't matter. When you're designing a system, you're designing to an order of magnitude. Okay, so you can be 10x above and 10x under. That's about the same system. To rephrase that, you're designing a system for, let's say, 100 users or 1,000 users is going to be the same system. For 10,000 users, probably going to be a different system. For a million users, it's going to be another one. But you see that you can jump quite a bit in scale before changing the system very much. All right, that is all for this. The metadata, you didn't really explain the metadata part. I was like, that's fine. Again, it's order of magnitude. You didn't really need to do the 12 gigabyte. You could have said, oh, there's extra metadata, but I'm going to assume it fits under the, if you look at your database, you have 1 kilobyte of string, which is your biggest item. Everything else is a couple of bytes here and there. Right, like an integer, 4 bytes. Yeah, 4 bytes, 4, 6, sorry. A string, probably a short string, an email is not going to be 100 character. So like everything else is way smaller than the text. So you could just say it's all dominated by the text. I'm just going to compute that. Okay. Just a neat here. You just added 20%. I think it's reasonable to say I'm just going to add 20% over capacity. But I guess it should be explained. All right, let's go to API design, because that's where I think we do have a lot to talk about. All right, so that's the API design here, the list. There's something missing here.
Create post and that. Some API itself is missing. That's what you're saying.
Well, so we're missing the upvote and downvote, but that's peanuts. What I'm looking at here really is we're missing something to fetch a post. Because what happens if list post will return the top popular one for a specific category? Then what if a user wants to actually get more of the tree for this specific post?
Okay, so that means the post ID and then the offset from where they want to retrieve is what missing here.
Exactly.
Post based on a post ID and offset.
This design only returns part of the data. There is no way to get the remaining of the data. And so from that perspective, it's very incomplete. Okay? Also, I think in general, if you think about it, what you could have done is list post just returns the top level post or the post IDs and maybe a blurb, so we can show that to the user, and let the user click on it to get the full post.
Okay.
And I think that would be a much more elegant system. I mean, some people can argue you can return more from list post, so you don't have to do a second fetch, potentially. That is fair, but then you still need to have this API to go fetch the remaining part. Okay. So one thing that wasn't listed, like, right, a fetch, a search, also, like, do we want to search? And that's a product question. Okay. Outside of that, okay, that's fair. One thing, I'm going to start talking here about details, because I think in general, you need more details. Okay. So when you say create post, what does create post return?
Okay. So that that response, how the response should look like, also how to list it here, right? That's what.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? Like list post, if you return a full post, you should say it. If you return a partial post, you should say it. And if I didn't dig into that because we're already a bit late and I wanted to kind of talk database and talk scaling. But if we had more time, I would have started asking questions about the pagination itself, right? Because it's an interesting problem. So it's like when you write in a computer language, an API is the function name. Obviously, it's the module itself too, but there's no module here. You can say the path could be your module, but function name, the arguments, the type for your arguments, and the return value. Okay? You should apply that here too. Okay, so user ID is an int. Okay, user ID is an int. Category is a string. Text is a string. Perfect. Doesn't have to be detailed. The reply here is important, right? Because the list is probably going to be a JSON object. And then telling me exactly how it's going to look like makes it easier to follow. Also shows that you understand the problem. One thing I'm going to say, you have create, post, and update. Update is not an update. It's actually creating a comment on a post. Right? So the name is very misleading. Feel free to ask if there's something that I say that doesn't make sense.
Sure.
All right, I am done with this. So let's move to the database. I'm going to have one question just for my understanding. Do you happen to code in Python as your primary language?
No, Java.
Interesting. Because you use datetime, and I was datetime, all lowercase is a Python thing.
I use mostly SQL also. So SQL, there is a datetime. I heavily use SQL database and then Java.
Okay. Because you also said email address and it's not capitalized. Created time, like that's why there's inconsistencies, right? User ID is a capital I, or at least it looks like a capital I to me. Email address doesn't have a capital A, right? If you're going to use a coding style, please stick to it.
Okay, sure, I will.
Okay, that applies to code, by the way. That's one of the things I look at when somebody writes code to me is, do you follow a consistent coding style? And here, we're a bit inconsistent.
Okay.
All right. Similar to what I said about APIs, you need to give more details. Okay, and you did answer some of the questions I had about this, but when it comes to database design, there's a lot of things you need to include. One is the primary key. Okay. In SQL, usually your primary key is your sharding key. So in NoSQL database, like that.
Okay.
You need to talk about the types, which is good. We included all the types, that's great. Foreign keys, any kind of constraints, that was perfect. You only mentioned it in post, but that told me you understand this. And the last thing is any index. Okay. And there was no index mentioned here. I do think you need an index on post because you're going to do query based on the parent ID.
And on the timestamp, related timestamp is what I need an index because that's what retrieve for all the posts.
Exactly. So you were aware of this. Please mention it. Okay, please say we do need to have an index on the created timestamp or an index on the parent post ID. Okay? All right, let's look at categories. Like categories is a good example of where we actually had a choice. Okay? And that's actually the product question. Do we want to allow categories to be renamed? That's a fair question. If we don't allow categories to be renamed at all, we don't really need an ID, right? We could use the natural key, which is the name itself, to be the name of our form. Okay. That's a bit of nitpicking here because there is a strong value being able to rename the name without losing, without it being our primary key. But that's something to consider here.
Okay.
Okay, point key relationship. And the reason why I mention that is because you do have, basically you added an ID to every single table. So be careful. Don't fall into the trap of always creating an artificial key.
Okay.
Right? A post technically could be a combination of the category ID, the user ID, and some unique identifier.
Okay.
Right? Because a post really is unique to a category, a user, and the timestamp, actually the created timestamp.
Okay.
So you could actually remove your ID altogether and have a composite key that includes all three.
Okay.
And that actually is a good key because it is unique and it doesn't have to change.
Yeah.
Okay? For you to consider, okay? Like in this case, I didn't penalize you too much on this, but I think it's something, you already have the base of building database. I think you're at the point where thinking through this helps or will help you grow. Okay, for MP, we talk about that. Technically, if this is SQL, you have to say when you can install null. Because we said it's no SQL, I think it's a little bit up in the air. Okay, so I think storing null is fine because no SQL just doesn't do any validation. Now, let's talk about upvote and downvote. Okay, so there's two ways of actually storing this, which we've discussed. One was a separate table that store the event themselves, or one is store the aggregate into the post table. Okay, and that's why I think you didn't really have a clear explanation of why we should store one over the other. Okay, and that's not the first part. I saw you have a hard time explaining in simple terms why a design is better.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to pay attention to that because that's where, if you stay, this is the basic level, right? Writing down a database schema, that's fine. Like my assumption is any good candidate is capable of doing that. What I'm really looking for is the next level, which is talking about the trade-offs you're making. And that was one of the trade-offs. And I really wanted to hear you mention the trade-offs very concisely and precisely. Okay? And so the main argument for having a separate table is because it offloads the rights from the post table to a separate table, which you made a good case for this. You said this is a read-heavy system, but I'm like, it's a read-heavy system, who cares? Like, if you do a lot of writes to this, this is the count itself. So the count itself doesn't necessarily have to change a lot. Arguable, but in general, you don't expect a lot of comments, people to spend their time actually clicking on upvoting and downvoting. Okay. Read-heavy system, most people are actually just reading through the data. They're not actually mutating the data. But outside of that too, like we could decide just to cache part of the post and do a separate cache if we think the upvote and the downvote are more expensive. Okay, so even if the data mutates a lot, we don't necessarily have our cache needs to reflect the latest data. And you ask the question later whether we allow stale data. And I think that would have been a good question to ask at that point. Okay. Again, that's a product requirement. Do we allow stale counts? Because another system we can do is have a separate table and have a separate system build the count for us. And cache the count in memory, like have a mem cache, basically that's cached by the post or the comment ID, and just do that. Okay, does it make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm going to put it here. This is called event sourcing. I'm going to send you a resource about that, okay? Event sourcing is the idea that when you have this kind of mutating state, You can either keep track of the final state, in this case the aggregate total vote, or you can keep track of the individual events. Okay? And there's arguments about why you should go one way or the other. One of the big upsides of event sourcing is recovery from mistake. Let's say we have a bug in our database where we inject the wrong user ID. And now we have somebody comments on a post, and that ends up commenting as a different user.
Okay.
Or instead of commenting once, we have a bug in our client, and one click ends up being 2 clicks.
Okay.
If we do event sourcing, we have a way to recover from this mistake. If we keep the count, then it's nearly impossible.
Okay. I see. Okay.
And so one of the strong plus for storing the actual events is because we can recompute the aggregate whenever we want, and that is much more flexible. Okay?
So once we aggregate it, are we going to update in the main table on a periodic basis? Is that required, or no, that aggregation, let's have it all the time in a separate table and then return?
Well, that is the discussion we can have. Okay, and I would totally welcome having that kind of discussion in this. Because, okay, at the end of the day, you showed me one solution. Okay, and there were some places where we kind of recognized that they were pathing the road, right? The sharding key was a good example. We had 3 choices. Actually, we had more than 3. But we had three choices, and we were not sure which one to take. I think that's fine to discuss that, because at the end of the day, distributed systems, there's never one solution, right? Even event sourcing, I'm telling you, like this is a superior way of doing it, but I don't think it's the final way, because it's more expensive, right? Like we have to now maintain a separate table. I'm just saying, I think in general, it works better because we can recover from any mistake. But then if you don't care about the mistake, let's say you're computing a number that's like, you don't really care if it's stale, you don't really care if at the end of the day it's consistent, then why would you pay the extra price of storing the data separately?
Question on the sharding part of it. Sharding based on the post ID. Does it make sense, or what do you think?
Not at all. I was trying to get you to kind of think a little bit more through that. What is the operation we're going to do a lot in the system?
Read is the most heavy operation, because this is a read heavy system.
Exactly, but reading which table?
Post.
What happened to the read operation on the post table? What did you just do if you shard by post ID?
Oh, I have to go to all the servers and get all, because I don't know where that post is.
That has a name. That's called a scatter gather query. Okay, if you know those terms, please use them. That's like, like it's good to use those terms, and it's good to be precise. So you turned our main operation as a scatter gather operation. Well, guess what? This is not what you want. Because the day your cache fails is the day your entire database is down. Because now we have our entire traffic is basically sent to all our shards. So that's what I was trying to get you to think through, is like which operation is actually important. And that is what determines your sharding key. So in this case, you are correct. Like categories is a good example. Like categories, we could shard by category, which means now the posts are in the same, all the posts for a category on the same server, probably not very desirable. What we can do in this case is sub-sharding. And so we're going to shard by categories, followed by, and I would have argued, the post itself should have an ID. the top level post.
Mm-hmm.
And then we store the post ID in every single comments that we have. And now we can actually put all the posts on a single server to avoid a scatter gather and allow potential sub-sharding.
Okay.
Okay? That does make the categories query slow, but I would argue that's probably less of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? But again, what's important is you thinking through the implication of doing this and outlining why you think this is important. Okay, the justification is as important as the actual answering those problems.
Okay.
One thing about vocabulary, you talked about latency.
Mm-hmm.
To ask if we allow inconsistent answers, or I should say eventual consistency.
Mm-hmm.
The proper term is staleness.
Okay.
Okay, if you use latency, and this is not what we usually. Latency is usually used either for network latency or for the end-to-end latency in the system, which is the time that the query leaves the user and they get the response back.
So here we are showing the stale data, correct? Latency is not.
Exactly. We haven't talked about latency at all during this problem. I think it's okay to talk about latency, but here this is about staleness.
Correct.
Okay, and that's a great question to ask, but don't use latency because that's the wrong word.
Okay.
Okay, write to cache, we talked about it. We talked about caching, you need to get all the information. In general, whenever you write a system like this, you need to give enough detail that the interviewer would be able to re-implement the system.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's why I'm like, indexes on your database, because you can't build your database without knowing what your indexes are, right? I can't write my SQL query unless I know what the indexes you want to add to the tables are. Okay. Okay. So I think that's the end of what I have. So just to sum it up, make sure to ask more product questions up front. Details, details, details. Okay. Return values on API, on the actual database, indexes, primary keys should all be mentioned. Cache needs to have all the details like key, value, invalidation, eviction policy potentially. And the last thing is always mention trade-offs, because at the end of the day there is no final answer. What's more important is the journey to get to the answer. Okay? All right. That's to sum it up my three main recommendations. Now, if that was an interview at Google, okay, based on your experience, your knowledge, I would be on the no hire. Okay. I've seen a good foundation, but it's missing a lot. Okay, it's missing a lot of those details. It's missing a lot of like the trade-offs. Also, at some point, the communication broke a little bit between the two of us. Okay, I think you have the foundation here.
Okay.
It's just a matter of practicing more so you get more confident, because also didn't feel like you were necessarily very confident in your answers. Is that a correct assessment?
So, because this is my first system design interview, I was a little bit nervous on how to present also. So I practiced a little bit, but I was not able to explain everything, whatever I know. So, like you mentioned, the different trade-offs and other things. Yeah. Now at least I got some experience and I know what are the areas that I have to improve and practice.
Okay. That was my view or my impression was that you are not confident. I guess with more practice, you're going to get more confident.
Okay.
And I don't see why that shouldn't over time evolve into a higher. Because you have the basics, you understand the problems. Now it's just a matter of fine tuning. Okay, and by fine tuning, there's going to be work, but I do see a good foundation. I am done talking. Do you have any questions about what I said? Anything that's on your mind?
So you mentioned that you will send one link for the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want me to give my email address, or you already have that in the meeting invite itself?
Wait, you've done other interviews in the past, right? It's not your first.
No, the system design is my first. I did data structures and algorithms, other interviews, but system design is my first.
Okay. It works exactly like a coding exercise. If nobody gave you written feedback, I don't know what's going on here, but I always give written feedback to people.
They gave the feedback. They gave written feedback, and it's shared to me.
Okay. It's going to work exactly the same way.
Okay.
Except I do not know how up level works, to be honest. So I will say that's my first time using the new platform. I will still give you that. I'll try to copy it in case something happens. So if you don't get it, I have a copy.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your feedback. I will try to improve on things where I'm lagging.
Perfect. Well, good luck with your revisions, and then hope have a good rest of the day.